Sure. So, good evening, everybody. We want to welcome you to our rescheduled date for Carving Connections, a discussion exploring AAC and human rights. We'll introduce ourselves in a moment, but if you would like to follow along with the slideshow for today, I'm going to post the bit.ly link in the chat. And today's panelists, our names are listed on the screen here. And in a moment, we're going to take just a minute or two and introduce ourselves for you. So we'll start with Emily.
So, Emily Cohen, my name is Emily Cohen. I'm from Bloomfield, Connecticut. I have a physical disability called athetoid quadriplegic cerebral palsy, and I'm sorry if I said that wrong. I am a member of a multiple advocacy groups that advocates for disabled people, which are Camden Coalition, YASA, which is Youth as self-advocates, Youth Steering Committees, and Connecticut Council for Developmental Disabilities. I graduated from Sacred Heart University in December of 2022 with my bachelor's degree in psychology, and I hope to become a therapist in the future. I am also a business owner of M's Disability Advocacy Consulting Services, LLC. When I'm not busy with my jobs, I enjoy spending time with my friends and family, listening to music and watching Netflix.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. Joby, can you go back to yeah, thank you. So there's my complete bio. I'll give you the quick version. I'm a mom of three. My youngest is an AAC user. We started her journey with AAC around the time that she was in second grade. I have a huge need to learn all things AAC and share information and advocate. And in addition to all of the AAC trainings that I've attended, I just can't get enough knowledge. And as we go further tonight, you'll hear a little bit more about my experiences as a parent of a child using AAC, the successes and the challenges. And again, thank you for having me.
And we have Nicole.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. My name is Nicole Natali. I'm a speech language pathologist and have been for 22 years now. I work for the CREC Resource Group, and I have a passion for working with school districts and adult teams in order to build capacity in augmentative and alternative communication, as well as assistive technology. And in my spare time, I sadly root for the Yankees, even though it was kind of sad this year. And I have two kids, and I love to read and watch Netflix as well, Emily.
And our final panelist for the night is myself. My name is EJ Picarillo. I work alongside Nicole at CREC Resource Group, which is one division of Capital Region Education Council. You may have heard of our magnet schools. We are a division that's adjacent to the magnet schools. I am also a speech and language pathologist in my 9th year, maybe 10th. I don't know. I've lost count. And I have the privilege of being able to specialize in assistive technology and AAC. It's always been a passion of mine. I remember when the show Breaking Bad was on TV, one of the characters was actually using spelling to communicate. And that was sort of my first exposure to AAC. And knowing that I wanted to become a speech and language pathologist, I just fell in love right away with wanting to serve that population. I am a breast cancer survivor, so my little plug to you is if it applies to you, please remember to go in for your checkups. It saved my life, so if it can benefit you in any way, please make sure you do that. And last but not least, technology, just in general, is a huge part of my life. Helps me, all sorts of different ways from executive functioning to communicating with my family who primarily lives in Europe, and just helps me be more efficient in my day-to-day life. So our goals for this evening, we are hoping to keep this chatty between you, our viewers, participants, and our panelists. We have a very loose structure that we're happy to be flexible as you all might have questions or want to talk about your lived experiences. But we do want to begin by defining, describing, and expressing our connection to AAC. We're certainly going to discuss AAC access and the equitable access as a human right. And, I think the panelists all have a personal goal of wanting to elevate the lived experience of AAC users and families. And you might fit into multiple roles. And if there's time, and I'm sure there will be at the end, we're hoping to be able to provide you with some resources so that you can further your learning and engagement even after we've signed off for the evening. So some possible topics just to get you thinking about what we, might begin to talk about this evening. There's a document called the Communication Bill of Rights, which outlines a number of rights that are fundamental to all humans, specifically related to communication. So we can pull that up and we can, chat about the implications of that document. We can talk about AAC devices and AAC services and what is the difference, or when you might need one versus the other. We can talk about evaluations for AAC. A lot of times, we want to recommend or request evaluations, so we can dive into that topic. Funding, using AAC as a tool, not just for expression, but for teaching and learning. And all sorts of great evidence-based practices. So just, start to think about which one of these areas might interest you. If you have questions or want to start a discussion, we welcome anything and everything related to AAC. I saw you talking, Joey, but you were muted. Oh, if you go one forward, there we go. It looks like one of the slides is a little bit, nope. There we go. Perfect. So before we kickstart our discussion, we just want to make sure that everyone is on the same page with regard to what AAC is. So the American Speech and Hearing Association, which is the governing body for speech language pathologists, is just one of many organizations that defines AAC. And as a speech language pathologist, this is something that I look to when I talk about AAC and describe it to somebody who maybe is not sure what that means. And really, it's an area of clinical practice that addresses the needs of individuals with communication disorders that are characterized by impairments in speech language production or comprehension. So a lot of times we think, AAC is for expression of language. And it is, but as we might talk about in a bit, it's also helpful to support comprehension or understanding of language. And the augmentative and the alternative pieces to AAC are used to describe when the user might use AAC. So augmentative refers to if the person maybe uses or is able to access their voice on a part-time basis or in certain situations. So their device or their systems are used to supplement existing speech. And other users identify more as alternative users, where it replaces their speech or it's used for speech that's either not functional or not able to be accessed. And AAC can be temporary or it can be permanent. Again, it's very individualized for the user. All right, so I think now we can open up the floor to some questions. We did have some members of our audience send in questions ahead of time, so we can start with those. Or if there's anybody from our participants that really wants to kick off our discussion with a specific question or a specific topic, we would welcome that as well.
I have a question.
Sure. And you
And
feel free to use the chat as well. We'll be monitoring the chat.
okay, give me 1 second. What can parents and guardians do differently to support individuals with AAC?
Parents and educators can just be patient. That's really the main thing, because if the person doesn't have patience, there can be so many communication breakdowns. And it is really unfair to the AAC user because they don't have any other choice other than to be patient because they can't just talk. So it should work both ways.
Thank you, Emily. If you don't mind, I have a follow-up question that goes together. Is that okay? What are the biggest barriers now, and what early on, if you can share, what were they early on and what are they now?
The biggest barriers with using AAC early on was just finding the right device for me. I have impaired fine motor skills, so I can't really use my hands well. So we discovered the Toby Dynavoxel games. But there are many Tobas out there, so finding the right one was a tedious process. And then getting it approved by insurance was a whole other challenge. The biggest barriers now is what I was talking about before, people not knowing how to interact with someone who uses a communication device or on the phone. People usually hang up on me because they think I'm a spam call. So sometimes I have to call multiple times before I get someone to actually listen to what I am saying. It takes a lot of persistence.
Thank you, Emily.
Joby, I don't mind sharing also from the parent side of thing. Emily had talked about the finding the right device, and also with the funding being kind of another beast in itself too. So our experience is we had gone to Connecticut Children's at the time had an assistive technology fair, and we met with different vendors, and we were able to take home a device to try for a few weeks. And our school, we had talked to them and said, hey, she's going to bring this device in, can you just work with it a little bit? We were fortunate at that time to have a team who was willing to do that. And the type of system that it was, they said she'll probably outgrow it super, super fast. It had little picture icons on it, and it was a strip, and you could only put so many, and you had to have that word. You had to look for the word and put it on a strip, and then it would speak. So our team reached out to a couple of other vendors who then brought devices in, which we got to trial. And quite interestingly, the device that my family loved and thought was fantastic was not the one that my daughter Abby worked best with. So it was interesting. If it was based on me, it's not the device I would have picked. So again, kind of what Emily's saying, right? You have to know what the user, look at everything, look at their cues, how they're working with it, not just if it's easier for me, if I like the colors better, all of that stuff. We were in a position with school that we kind of negotiated a little bit. We had asked for our insurance to fund it, right? The school recommended it, so we didn't have to. If it's a school recommendation that they need to access their education, the school, should be asked to purchase it. We wanted to purchase our own so that we owned it. And we had asked the school if they could do certain things like carry a longer warranty on it, have an extra phone charger for it, and be responsible if there were any if the device was damaged and we needed rentals. So it was a conversation at PPT. So that's how we funded ours, was privately. And then as technology changes, and the device at that time used a memory card. So the memory card, if it got static, it would wipe everything out. So again, going through that process of back to the school and having the evaluation, it doesn't mean once you have a device that that's it forever and ever and ever. So there are different, ways of funding. And I just thought it was, a good time to hop in on what Emily just said.
I also want to jump in and piggyback off of something Emily said. So she talked about patience and how a communication partner, really needs to be patient. Um, and just in my own experience as a speech and language pathologist supporting uh, schools, teams in schools, especially up here in the Northeast, we are not terribly patient by nature. We talk fast, we walk fast, and throughout the school day, we are often, busy with hundreds of different tasks we want to accomplish and learning objectives that need to be met. So I often find myself in situations with educators or families saying, well, it takes a long time. And I just sort of say, yes, yes, it does. That's part of what we need to adjust as communication partners is we need to set, contribute and contribute to setting the pace of it. So we have to also provide more time and be patient. And
And
it's
just
hard.
to, it is hard. And just to, you know, go off of what you just said, EJ, I mean, partner communication partner training is a research-based strategy. And so just working, in a private room together is not really going to necessarily help our AAC users. It's working, like Emily said, with staff, with peers on how to be good communication partners and giving good wait time. And so it's so important.
So Renee mentioned trialing different devices. So Nicole and EJ, do you have to do an AAC evaluation in order to get an AAC device?
You want to take that one, EJ? I know it's your favorite. One of your
Oh,
favorites, or you want me to?
you start and then I'll tap in.
Okay, so the short answer is no. A full-blown augmentative and alternative communication evaluation does not have to occur per se in order to start trialing and or using AAC devices and systems. There is, and we can put the link in the chat, maybe I'm sure EJ has it. There is a myth out there that all assistive technology or AAC has to be provided via an evaluation. And that's a myth. And in terms of the federal government and IDEA. But what does need to happen, of course, is considering the student's family, the student's environment, their tasks that we want them to complete, and then doing thoughtful trials of various assistive technology or AAC devices and taking data to see what works best for the student and the team and the student's family. So a full-blown AAC eval where a professional comes in and doesn't really know the student and does their best and does a bunch of trials and then writes a beautiful report is not always necessary. Sometimes it can be helpful in complex cases, but it's not necessary. What is necessary is some thoughtful consideration of tools and the student and trialing over time.
And just to sort of distinguish between, AAC evaluations and providing services through the schools versus insurance, and submitting to get an insurance funded device, the parameters and the requirements are different. So, when Nicole's talking about is an evaluation required? No, she's referring to the public schools or, a school system, a school district. You don't need to do an evaluation, necessarily in order to start using AAC with a student. And really you shouldn't be waiting around for an evaluation to try things out. If it's available, you can try it. But unfortunately, insurance companies do have their own policies and regulations. And most insurance companies will mandate that you have to complete an evaluation. You have to take data, you have to show, proof, quote unquote, that the person requires a device. And that largely depends on the insurance, unfortunately.
Thank you. And I'll ask a question and then it'll kind of loop to all of you, I guess. So is there a minimum age requirement or prerequisite to somebody getting an AAC device? And then to Emily and Renee, how old were you and how old was your daughter when you first got AAC?
So I can,
You want to take that first, Emily?
I think I was like 7 years old when I started using AAC. Before that, I just spoke with my voice. And if people didn't understand what I was saying, I just spell out the words, which is a method that I still use today.
Thank you, Emily.
And similarly, Abby was about the same age. We were in birth to 3, and speech at that time wasn't our primary focus. Speech kind of came in at the end, and they were doing what they were telling us was a picture exchange. So they were just taking pictures of familiar things in my daughter's environment and didn't really understand the process. I thought it was more for matching and identifying things. So didn't really have a clear understanding. So when we had gotten into the public school and hearing a little bit more about PECs, we were using sign language with our daughter at the time, and she was having some good success with it. And kind of to debunk another myth here, we were told that to stop signing if we keep signing that she'll never talk. I really kind of in hindsight wish I wouldn't have stopped that, because even now she's 16 and we haven't done sign language in at least 12 or so years. There are times that I still fall back on her familiar signs, and she will. She was just sick again this week. We were at the hospital and she was telling the doctor her feels sick. So that was really helpful. And I feel it's the same with AAC also. One of the myths are if you give a kiddo a device, they're not going to talk. And false. My daughter's language exploded once she had her communication device. People weren't always on board. We were told that there was a criteria that had to be met. She had some pretty significant behaviors, and she had to get those behaviors in check first before we could use a communication device, because she could throw it. And so kind of pushing back on the team and the professionals, realizing that all behavior is communication, right? That what if she had the power to say no, or I don't want that, or I don't like that, or go away, or leave me alone? How would that look? And then there was kind of that aha moment. And it has been, one of the things that I knew in the pit of my stomach that we should be doing, that we did. Wasn't easy then, not easy now, but that's kind of our journey into it. And she got her first device, I want to say right about the same age as Emily, probably about 2nd grade.
And just, I see Robin's hand up, but just to, another myth, Renee, sort of kind of alluded to, which the question was that Jen asked is there a certain age or prerequisite for AAC? And the answer is no, just the person has to be breathing. There is no prerequisite. If there's a communication need that's unmet, you can start AAC as young as possible. In fact, we do when we speak to our young children, we're using our hands and our gestures and all sorts of communication, which could be considered AAC.
Thank you, Nicole. Robin?
I'm sorry, I don't want to, I'm just going to jump in real quick, just for interpretation purposes, if we could just be mindful of our rate of speech. that was a request from our interpreters who are working very hard. Thank you.
Okay. My question is more of a systemic kind of question. Has there been any kind of a concentrated effort to educate school SLPs as far as a lot of their attitudes about AAC, and this is the program we use, or these are the devices we use? Is there any kind of push to really educate the school-based SLPs?
It's a great question. And it's something that Nicole and I talk about just on a weekly basis, are talking about, what, first of all, we have a very heterogeneous population of speech and language pathologists, some who are fresh out of school and are still sort of getting their clinical practice under their belt, all the way up through our veteran speech and language pathologists who've been practicing for a number of years. And in terms of time and experience, that doesn't even necessarily mean you can be an SLP for 30 years and never have an AAC user that you've ever supported. So what Nicole and I really try to do is help systems and teams and districts think about, you know, are we looking at features of apps? Are we looking at the needs of the students and matching them to the features of the apps that they need? And some districts, they have their favorite apps. And sometimes that's because the speech and language pathologist is familiar with it, or it's been used, for a number of years. And sometimes that works, but other times there are features missing, or there are, certain like limiting beliefs. So it's hard to look at the state as a whole in each district, because we're comparing trucks to bananas. And Nicole and I, usually when we start to partner and work with a district, we're able to really focus on that district's needs. And sometimes it's even like a school or a building's needs. So I know that was a very long-winded answer to your question, Robin. What do you think, Nick?
No, what EJ said, but in terms of, I almost thought you were wondering if there was like a maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but more of like a higher level push for that, other than EJ and I kind of working with districts. Is there a kind of like is that kind of more what you were talking about, Robin?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, like, is Asha like pushing this as an agenda? My child is nonverbal. She is 34. So the technology that was available when she was in school was not appropriate for her. She needs eye gaze, and it just wasn't available. But just the generalized attitude that I hear from other parents as well is, well, this is what we have, and they use it with the speech pathologist during their session. And so there's a whole lack of understanding of the need to have it available at all times for the student. So I don't know if there's some kind of training that goes into speech pathologists to address that.
I can tell you that I went to grad school in 2000 to 2002 on a professional training grant. I studied at Penn State with Janice Light. And back then, the federal government recognized that SLPs weren't getting pre-professional training in AAC. And I do believe it's gotten better in the 22 years, but I don't think the ASHA exam has changed all that much. I think there's very few questions on the ASHA exam. I, of course, haven't taken it in 22 years, but from what I understand, many graduate level programs still don't even have a required AAC course. Many of them are still, if they offer one, elective. So unfortunately, some of it does depend on the SLP's interest. At this point, there are a ton of resources out there. And I see so much variation in the state from district to district. There is a lot of information to be had. It's the matter, it just depends on the district population, the SLP, unfortunately, from my experience.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Jovi.
I have two questions. I often hear, especially for the younger kiddos, that they first have to master PECs before they can go into a device. And then my second question is a lot with the younger kiddos too, that they start with birth to three and they have a program or by the insurance and they're using this program already. And then they transition to school and the school's like, well, we don't have that program. This is the program we have, and this is what we're going to use. So now that student, right, has to then now learn a whole new program. Is there is that okay to do? Is there a way that parents can say, well, they've already been trained on this program. Can we continue with it?
Great questions. So it was a two-parter. Let me see if I can remember the first part. It was, in response to having to master one form of communication or of AAC before moving on to something high tech. And that is absolutely not the case. Something like PECS or Picture Exchange Communication System, it's typically paper-based. It's just not accessible to a lot of people. It requires a great deal of fine motor control. It requires sometimes carrying around this binder. It requires a lot of maintenance. And so it's just not accessible to a lot of students who require AAC. It's also not robust. And what I mean by that is, if you've ever seen a PECS book or a book with visual symbols in it or picture symbols in it, there might be maybe 100 symbols in there. But if you think about complex language, right, and all of the different sorts of words that we need to be able to combine, 100 words is not going to cover even a fraction of what we need to access. And that's where our high tech systems come into play, because the screen's ability to change, our ability to quickly program a new word in or add a picture, it's just not represented on those no tech or light tech options. And just quickly thinking about the motor plan of a device, right? Imagine you were going to start using a computer, your friend's computer. And when you sit down and you try to log into their computer, you look down at the keyboard and you see the keys are all in a different place, right? Most of us use a QWERTY keyboard where the letters are in a predictable spot. And we've sort of, as we've typed and learned how to use computers, we've learned the layout of that keyboard. So we can go to pretty much any computer, and based on our motor plan that we've developed, we can sort of learn how to use that new computer. It's the same sort of principle with AAC. We want to have symbols and icons in the same spot, give or take considerations where they need to be moved, to develop that efficiency, to develop that automaticity and that rapid ability to select icons. And if you're constantly moving things around and velcroing and changing, that motor plan cannot exist. So we could probably be here for the next several hours talking about how PECS is not a great, robust option for AAC, but I'll let anybody else chime in there too.
And with PECs, and we certainly use light tech communication supports and all, all sorts of supports for communication systems, not just high tech AAC, but I've seen many a student have a lot of success with a backlit dynamic display AAC device where they didn't have a lot of success with using light tech or just light tech supports. So, and then the other question was, well, does anybody else want to chime in about the PECS piece before we move on? Okay, just wanted to make sure. The other question about a child or student already using a particular system and then the school district says they can't use it. That is not considering the needs of the student. Every student, an IEP is an individualized education plan based on the student's needs. So if that system is working for the student, just because the district doesn't have it or own it or use it, or if they're not familiar with it, that doesn't mean it's still not appropriate for the student. So I would say that's a policy barrier, or probably unwritten policy barrier. What I'm if that's actually if that's happening in schools, which I'm sure it is, and that's something that the team has to come together and really talk about and consider for that student, because it would take a lot of new learning on the student's behalf, just to switch systems through no fault of their own. So. Oh, it looks like there's a question for Emily. I can read it off to you, Emily. It's, how does the public respond to your means of communication when you're out in the community? The good and the not so good, if you're open to sharing.
The response the public gives me is mixed. I will start with when I do have my communication device. So in one-on-one conversations, it's mostly good. If the person is patient, it's easy. I can clearly get my thoughts out, and the person can clearly see that I'm not cognitively disabled at all. If the person is not patient, and it is more than one person, that is where I get talk over. People don't wait for me to type or don't realize that I am typing. So that gets very frustrating. I also can talk with my voice, but I have a pretty heavy speech impediment. So mostly the people who know me can fluently understand me. But for the people who don't know me, they assume that I have a cognitive impairment of some sort, because for some reason people associate intelligence with the way someone speaks. So that can be very frustrating.
Thank you for sharing, Emily. Renee, did you want to add anything as a parent, like your experiences in the community?
Sure. And Emily, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I see, especially pre-COVID, because we really haven't done many outings since COVID. But we would go to some of Abby's favorite places, like a local ice cream place or a local Dunkin' Donuts, so that she could practice interactions. And then it was kind of a good thing. People got to know her. They would see her come in with her device, but they would already think that they knew her order. So she would often order a gluten-free, dairy-free ice cream. So I actually had one person say, we already know what you want. And I said, maybe you don't today. So I think people have good intentions and they think that they're communicating, but wait for the person to communicate first. Um, Overall, we've had a positive experience. I feel like people ask questions. I think the most difficult thing is when people want to touch her device, that don't have any right to touch it. They're not modeling for her. She, at least at this stage in her life, she doesn't really seem to mind people putting their hands on to model. But if you're looking just to look and go, oh, this is cool. Oh, no, this is not cool. This is her voice. And step back and she'll communicate with you. But overall, I would think, pretty receptive in the community. And what I love is her favorite time of year is fall, and we go on hay rides. And that's when I find we do a lot of modeling on our device. There's so much to see and do, and we're sitting on hay rides. And more frequently we've been on hay rides with special education teachers, SLPs, who are seeing it in real time and are sharing their experiences and asking questions. So it's really, really been beautiful. We take every opportunity that we can to, engage.
Thank you. And I don't know, EJ or Nicole, if you have anything to add to that. I know you're not AAC users. So Emily, another question we had for you was how can you use your AAC device? Do you only use it to communicate, or do you use it to email or text or anything like that?
So, my device is called a Toby Dynavox I-13 Games. I use it completely with the movement of my eyes. This device really makes me fully independent. I can make phone calls, text, email, use social media, take pictures. Especially with the phone calls, that has enhanced my independence immensely.
That's very cool. And Renee, did you want to add anything to that? No.
Like, no, but yeah, actually I do. So as we're learning the capabilities of her device, and I think this is an area as a parent that I struggle, right? Because she gets her device and it's only used to answer questions. That's it. It's only we're gonna ask you a question and that's your answer. And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't feel right. My daughter loves spelling, so she uses the word prediction a lot. She uses the Go Find Me. So it'll bring you up to the keyboard. She'll type in the word and then she can search for the icons. Then I happen to see like there's buttons for Netflix and for Bluetooth and for Alexa and for all of these things and for email. And I'm like, oh, now what? So I reached out to her device company, and we have been finding out so many different ways that she can utilize this. We love asking Alexa to tell knock knock jokes. She can turn the lights on and off with her device through Alexa. If she needed to call emergency services, she could, and there could be a pre-programmed phrase in there that I need help, or send help, or something like that. She's not doing this right now, and it's really because of her communication partners and our capabilities and or lack thereof. She can send emails. You can plug her device into a computer. You can use it via Bluetooth. So there's so many things that the device can do, but she is not going to learn until she's taught, or really has that opportunity to explore the device. Sometimes people will think that our AAC users are stimming, or there's no value in what they're doing. And there's tons of value. They're hearing things, they're finding things, they're just exploring. But what I really wish as a parent is I knew more. I knew all the things, because I would want to teach her all the things.
Thank you, Renee. Tamara, were you going to ask a question? I saw you unmute, so I didn't know if you were going to ask something.
Sorry, you have to bear with me. I'm normally on an iPad, and for some reason, my son decided that it was a no meeting. So I'm trying to do this by my phone and I have no idea what I'm doing. So I'm kind of like all over the place. Like I couldn't, I Zoom all the time, like with doctors and everything, but with the multiple people, this has been like like I really haven't done this since COVID. So I'm sort of like, I've got so much to say, but I can't say it because I don't know what to do. Like if I talk, will it unmute me? Anyways, yeah. So my son, hi Renee. My son he's 13. We started with the AAC when he was in kindergarten. We did the whole birth to 3. We started with PECs. From PECs, we just, the PECs book was exploded. We had, photocopied little tiny pieces of everything that we had in the house. And we decided that we were going to try an AAC, and we ended up getting it ourselves. We had the device before school even knew that we had it. And it was school that said, hey, you guys have this device. Can we use it? So we kind of jumped in and on the backwards end of things. Like I didn't know anything. So hold on, baby. Yep. After I need you to go. Okay. You can have it in a little bit. Sorry. So we started completely backwards, and then school found out, and then I learned as I was going, and we've gone through Proloquo to Go to Touch Chat to Proloquo for Text back to Touch Chat. We had a device that was from that people came in, and I'm sorry, I didn't realize the door was locked. We had a device that was designed kind of for him. I can't even remember what it was because it was so long ago, and we ended up realizing that it was basically just an iPad with an app. So we ended up over the years, we just basically, we never went through insurance. We never had the school fund it. We just basically paid for everything ourselves because we didn't want the school to have ownership of it. So now what I do, I was going back to when people were talking about school and the programs, and if the school didn't have the program, then the kid was out of luck because they had to go with what the school knew. And we encountered that ourselves. And what we ended up doing was we had an AAC eval come in. We had every teacher trained, every para that was going to be working with my son that went through this whole evaluation thing. They PowerPointed it, they put it in paper, they did everything. So anybody that had to work with him going forward had to be trained on how to use his AAC device. And we, to this day, send in, he has a talker that he wears, and we also have a backup because we all know they get thrown, they get broken, thank you, Apple Care, because without it, we would be doomed. So we send an extra device in with his exact talker. So everything's mirrored. So whoever's working with him on that day has a device that they can use to model instead of using his own. So that's our end of it. So I'm just here to learn more and as much more as I can, like what other programs are out there, what are the good cases. If anybody has any help on that, so that's where we are. So
Thank you for sharing. I think we have another question for Emily. Let me see. What is the most effective way to advocate for our children and use AAC?
I'll jump in. Oh, I saw Emily on mute.
The most effective way to advocate for children who use AAC is to educate the ignorant people who don't know about AAC, who don't know the proper etiquette for interacting with someone who uses AAC.
Thank you. And when you were talking about proper etiquette, it reminded me of another common question we get. Emily, I wonder, has anybody ever taken away your device and not given you access to it? Because we've heard that from families where, oh, the student is stimming on it, so they take it away.
Yeah. I had a really bad experience with a personal care assistant who did that.
I'm sorry about that. Thank you. for sharing. And Renee, you can chime in, and then after Nicole and EJ, if you want to tell us about whatever the best practice and going back to that communication is a human right.
Yeah, no, I just want to say, Emily, thanks for sharing that. And I'm really sorry that happened to you. And it's truly one of my big fears when I'm not around Abby, that, they'll take her voice away and she'll have no way to communicate. So thank you for sharing the real side of that.
Well, I can start, and then I'm sure EJ will jump into. I'm sorry, Emily, that did happen to you. We always talk to school teams about how a device, a communication system, should never be taken away from a child, a student, a learner, just like you would never put tape over a speaking child's mouth for them not to communicate. And so we work with teams on strategies when, if a student is speaking the same word over and over again during inappropriate times, how to respond to that, how to respond appropriately without taking away a communication device. It's a very frequent discussion. And access to AAC is always first and foremost. How are our students accessing it? Do they have it available throughout the day? And that doesn't always mean accessing their high-tech system all the time throughout the day either. It's always working with whatever communication system or parts of their system make sense at the time, but it should never be taken away.
Thank you. Oh, you want to add to it, EJ?
Yeah, just to kind of jump in. So I think that I spend a lot of my time working with adult learners rather than actual students, which I miss very much. But adults learn the same way that kids do. All humans, generally speaking, learn through modeling. So if you have one team member, one person on that team who understands the importance of AAC, views it as a human right, and is fully on board, sometimes that person just engaging with the AAC user in a way that promotes independence and facilitates communication opportunities. One by one, other members of the team watch that happening, and then they start to buy in. Sometimes Nicole and I are that person where we come in and people have to watch us model. People have to watch us sit there and like be a little bit uncomfortable with the amount of time and patience that's needed. Like, and just acknowledging that, yes, you might feel a little bit uncomfortable, but that will become pretty normal. Um, so again, it's about like modeling not just language, but also modeling these communication partner behaviors for other people.
Thank you. Renee, were you going to add to that?
Yeah, so EJ, I appreciate you saying that, because I have felt over the years, so my daughter has easily, without counting, at least 11 speech and language pathologists, probably more, due to either, leaving, maternity leave, quitting, COVID, telehealth, all of the things. And what we have found is we are constantly waiting for people to catch up to Abby to know what she knows. So they're starting from square one, or told, oh, we need to take her device so that we can learn the device first. I live with her. I don't know the device. We learn together. So one thing I had started doing was taking Loom videos. And so I would record our interactions and then share them with the team. And we were fortunate during COVID, we had actually gotten hooked up with an AAC coach. So we would send her the videos and then we would meet and she would coach me on things that I could do differently. and it was pretty awesome. And to see my daughter, you know, exploding, and I didn't have to know where every single word was. I didn't have to know how to use the device. And I think sometimes Abby gets a kick out of me as I'm like, okay, I know where this is. I'm gonna hit this and the this, and she's like, oh my gosh, you know, this is torture, mom. But it's so good, at least in my opinion. And Emily, tell me if I'm wrong. I think it's great for my daughter to see me making mistakes and see me taking a long time and even laughing about it. And if I get frustrated, how do I react by my frustration? So, you know, it's just so valuable.
Thank you. Do you want me to read the question in the chat for Emily? Emily, was your family helpful advocating in your early years? And is there advice you would give to families?
Yes, I'm the way I am because of my mom. My mom treated me just like a typical kid. She kind of forced me to be independent. My advice is to let your kid be like every other kid.
Thank you, Emily. And Renee's giving you hearts.
And, you know, it's so awesome to hear that, Emily. I have 2 older children, and they were the ones that would call me out on stop babying her, stop doing this and that. And so the interaction between them, I was like, yeah, okay. So thanks for reiterating.
Did anybody from the audience want to ask a question? I'm just going to pause and give space for you to do that.
Emily, what do you wish more people understood about the experiences and capabilities of individuals who rely on an AAC device for communication?
I would say I wish people realize that someone's capabilities doesn't have anything to do with how they communicate. Professionals didn't have high hopes for me because of my disability and how I communicate. But now, I am a college graduate with my bachelor's degree. I live independently with my fiance. I am a known professional disability advocate, and I'm a business owner. I have achieved a lot more than people expected from me, and I wish that wasn't the case. I wish what I did was normal for disabled people, but unfortunately, it's extraordinary for me to live the type of life I'm living.
Renee, were you going to add something to it that you wish people knew?
Yep. Yeah, I just didn't know if Emily was finished. No, I think right now it's more, again, what I wish I knew, not necessarily in the community. Okay, as I say no, I'm thinking of all the yeses, right? God, tell me I'm a liar. Family, right? Why does she need that? I understand her. Why does she need that? Same thing. It's going to hinder her growth. Why does she need that? Don't make her take that to the store. School, you know, thinking back to at least one teacher in particular, you know, oh, I don't believe in those things. So it's just kind of all of those myths, all of the daunting, you know, in school now, you know, we can understand her. Well, 1 word, 2 words, that's not going to make her an effective communicator, especially if someone has hurt her, if she has something, you know, important to tell, or if her verbal language isn't intelligible enough for people to understand. So really it is an extension of her. It's not just this cute, cool little tablet. You know, she really needs our investment in teaching her. And we also need to stop and listen as she's teaching us too.
Thank you, Renee. And Nicole and EJ wanted to ask if there was anything on the topic list that you felt particularly passionate about that you wanted to share with the group.
Well, while EJ's looking, I'm wondering if I could ask Renee and Emily a question from their experience, or is it Tamara? Did I pronounce it right? Tamara? The second one? Tamara? Okay. See, we're using AAC. One of my questions is just based on what you were saying is sometimes I experience the opposite where family really does understand their child. They understand the way their child speaks, their mannerisms, um, but that student can sometimes express themselves sometimes in more sophisticated fashion using more high-tech AAC, or their communication is not always understandable to others, to the general community, because they're just not as familiar. Um, and we will get at times families that won't use some of the high-tech AAC devices at home. And you oftentimes for very good reasons, of course, but I guess I'm asking, um, what would you say to people like EJ and I who are trying to team with families? Um, any advice you can give us um, to help support AAC use in the homes? And it's not always like this, but it does happen pretty frequently each year. I get a few cases of families who, for whatever reason, not that they disagree with the AAC per se, but aren't using it like school is. I don't know if there was an actual question in there, but just looking for advice.
I think I heard the question in there.
Got it.
So
Okay.
I think there's there's a couple of things that you could do is, if it's like really find out what their interest is, or if there's something that the family does, if it's they have game night or something like that, and really kind of bring the fun. So maybe bringing out things that their child wouldn't necessarily always say with them. And then kind of the other thing is, okay, if you all were to leave and you just left me with your child right now, would I be able to understand them? If you were at Target and they got lost, would they be able to have somebody understand that they're lost, they're scared, your name, your phone number? So kind of those real life scenarios potentially could be helpful to parents. And for them to think about how often they're translating for others.
Yeah. Yeah, I think families sometimes don't realize how often they are. And sometimes it's because it's for quickness and for safety and completely understandable, but yeah, not sure. Thank you.
I would just focus on the positives, like how much more you would be able to understand. But I think also respect the families and users' decision.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to just add, if I can, I think for some families, just the thought of adding one more thing is overwhelming, and it's a piece of technology that they're not familiar with. So I just think the overwhelm might be more of where the barrier is.
Yeah, I think you're right, Robin. One of a success story was we um worked with a student and opened up the grid to I think an 80 message. I can't remember the particulars, but it had a lot of words on it. And when it went home, um, we probably didn't work enough with the family to show them, exactly, tell them the reasons why. There's probably not enough education, and it was very overwhelming for the family in general. And then, but what we did in the school was we sent some videos home. We did some very quick discussions about maybe you can just use it during, I think Renee or someone mentioned game night, or just use it when you do your reading at night, or some routine that's positive, and start really small. And continuing to have those discussions was very helpful. And so, but I agree, Robin, that in that case, it was
it was so overwhelming, and and life was already overwhelming. And so they just needed more support. But what the school did, because sometimes the schools will get frustrated because they'll say, well, we're using it here, but it's not going to, what does it matter if the student isn't also using it at home? And of course it matters. It matters at school, and we always talk about that. So what the school did was just really get her familiar at school, and the student started to become really successful too. And then that was helpful, for the family to see as well.
I have a question. Speaking of home and school, now my son, we have the talker. Hold on, buddy. Hold on. No, we're not done. He has this talker, which is touch chat. So it has all the pictures, and then it has the QWERTY keyboard and everything. And at home, he prefers, like, he'll have his regular iPad that he uses, and he'll just go into the search mode and he'll type. He just spells whatever it is he wants. There's no pictures, there's no icons, there's no nothing. I want to go to McDonald's or dinner first, then mom's phone. And it's like, and we try to redirect him to use his talker, but it's also, communication is communication. So you can't say no, don't use your iPad to talk. But we find ourselves doing that. We're like, no, use your talker, which you have to something to say, because we're trying to get him into the talker mode, because that's what he has at school, because he doesn't have his iPad at school to go into that search mode. So we're trying to figure out a happy medium. If anybody has any suggestions or thoughts, I mean, you can't, it's like when you started with text, if he showed you a picture of a gummy bear, my God, give him a gummy bear, he's getting it. You have to honor all those wishes. But it's like, now we're getting older, and it's like Renee said, what happens if you lose at Target? Does he have the capability to use his talker and say, I mean, yes, I know how. If I saw a child with a talker, I would know how to go in there, use the talker. But the average person can't do that. So what would you recommend via the using the phone to type? We were seriously thinking about getting him his own phone. Again, this is off topic but on topic. But so he had texting communications, like I would text you, hey, what's up, what's for dinner? Like, is there a program that you can have where he can have a phone where he can just text, but he can't call? Because my kid is a whiz when it comes to computers. I mean, he can take his iPad and hook it up to the TV in the living room, and we don't even know how to do that. There's things we have to put on guided access with everything. Otherwise, his talker would become, he'd be at school doing, he'd be on YouTube all day if we didn't have these things. So any suggestions or tips on that end, like what we can, how do we navigate, how do we navigate the how he's talking at home versus how he's talking at school, and how can we combine it all into one, if that makes any sense?
It does. And I know EJ and I are probably bursting. I mean, I'll just say a few things and EJ, go for it. I mean, first of all, how wonderful that he is spelling to communicate. And the reason I say that is because if he's only ever going to use touch chat, which is a wonderful support, but he will only be able to communicate what's programmed in there. So the fact that he's communicating by spelling is really terrific. That is novel, generative language that he's using. I just have a quick clarification question. When he's on the phone, you said search mode. So how is he typing on the phone?
He'll basically type anything that he wants to say. If he wants to go for a drive, if he wants to go, like his needs.
Okay, right, but
if he's trying to make small talk, or if he's trying to be funny, like we're working on more of the communication versus just the yes, no answering questions. But he'll use the search mode to type with no matter what he wants to say. Honey, not right now. Okay, you can have it in a little while. I'm not saying goodbye yet. No, we're not saying goodbye. Later. Not available. Okay. All right.
No, don't apologize. If there's any group that understands this one, right? And when he's using the touch chat, is he using the symbols or is he spelling for the most part on the keyboard with touch chat?
No, he's spelling.
Yeah.
He's spelling even on touch chat. So
Mhm.
we tried to go to protocol for text because that basically all texting.
Yeah.
And he didn't want it. He wanted to go back to touch chat. So
Mm.
of course we let him. We let him.
Yep. And now as Emily has got her hand up, so I'll let Emily respond for sure, and then go for it, Emily.
Does he use the talker fluently when he doesn't have the phone? If so, really don't think it matters. The goal is communication. It doesn't really matter the method, at least in my opinion.
Did you hear all that, Tim? Right. The goal is communication. Yep. And I was going to say something similar, Emily. Well, first of all, with touch chat, he can text. If you do a long hold on the top of the touch chat message window, there's something there called share. And if it's hooked up to messaging, and if it doesn't have to be a cell service iPad, as long as it's on Wi-Fi, his message can get text to his contacts. So just so you know, in touch chat, and we're writing goals for that for kiddos or objectives, because texting is a huge way to communicate now. And I didn't see the chat, but I see Renee. So just so you know, in touch chat, and we can put it in the resources and the slide deck, he could be practicing or using it to text. But then you can also, he could be using touch chat on a phone, number one, if that's how he prefers it, or he could be using a phone to text when he's out and about, and that's super portable if that's what he ends up choosing to use. You don't have to just use one device either. So I agree with Emily. If he really likes the spelling, and I wanted to make sure he had access to spelling with the touch chat, which it sounds like he does, then he sounds so tech savvy, he's gonna end up using what works for him. If he didn't like the Proloqua for text, he could also be using texting in an iPhone and have it speak aloud without a specialized program. If he wants to use that not just for texting, but for communication, you go to a restaurant, he could use that, and as he's typing, it could be speaking aloud without even a specialized program.
Hold on. Now you had said that when he uses touch chat, he can only use what's in I can put anything into touch chat that I want.
Oh, no, yes. But what I'm saying is then he would be he's only reliant on you. So what we always want our kiddos to be able to read and spell, because ultimately they won't be relying on an adult or someone else to program in on the device, is what I meant by that. Yeah. And if he's not able, have you tried the touch chat texting? Because if you long hold on the message window and it doesn't show share, it might be just restricted from the iPad, but it's very powerful.
I might have to reach out to you privately after this.
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
Because I had no idea that was an option. It's something we've been trying to navigate. We have our SLP through school, who was our private SLP, but now because she's with our school, she's now our school SLP.
Yeah.
So we're reaching out. We're thinking about exploring different avenues privately.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm open to anything and everything to try to expand his, because I know that just texting and spelling is his way to go. And he's pretty good with the spelling.
Yeah, no, you can email EJ or I. We're happy to hop on a quick Zoom just to demo it and see what, to show you what it looks like. It's very easy to do, but it just might not be set up that way depending on the iPad, the current
Awesome.
iPad, but yeah.
Thank you.
EJ, did you want to read your question to Emily?
Yes, I have a final question for you, Emily. So this is something that I'm constantly thinking about and have been thinking about for the past hour and a half. So the question is, when you're crafting a message, What do you prefer, or how are you most comfortable with your communication partners and what they're doing while they're waiting for your response? Are you comfortable with them looking at you and maintaining that eye gaze? Are you comfortable with them looking at your device as you're crafting the message, looking away, or something else?
It doesn't really matter to me, honestly, as long as they are patient.
Thank you. I appreciate your insight. I think it's also probably a pretty personal opinion depending on the AAC user, but I like to get a general sense of what the variety of answers are. So thank you for sharing.
And I also did have one more kind of thing to add, and um, something I was curious about. And if we don't have time, excuse me, tonight to answer it here, maybe Emily, we could get it via email and share it out when we share the deck and stuff. But I was thinking to a time earlier on in our AAC journey where, we had Abby's communication device at a pediatrician. It was a new doc that we were seeing. He was filling in. And, my daughter's sitting up on the table, her AAC device is next to her, and he comes in and, was talking to her. And I'm like, hello, I'm over here, um, she's not going to understand you. She's not going to be able to answer you, all of the things going through my head. Because she was probably about, I don't know, 10-ish. So normally when a doc would come in and see a 10-year-old, they're probably going to say, hey, how are you? What hurts today? And I was kind of like had my back to him because I didn't want my daughter to hear, but I was saying she's probably not going to answer you. She has autism. She uses this device. I appreciate that he was like, oh, okay, I'm talking to her. She's the patient. And I was like, I love that. You're right. You are absolutely right. Kind of going back to one of Emily's points early on. Treat me like you would treat everybody else. And he did. He was treating her like every other 10-year-old he probably had. So that was kind of another aha moment for me. But as she's getting older, and at some point I'm not going to be around. She's a kiddo with some pretty significant medical complexities. We were just in the emergency room again on Monday. And at some point, I'm not going to be around to fill in the gaps in the information. So our doctor's going to be taking her seriously. How is she going to get them to wait and communicate, right? Especially in an ER. We got to go, we got to go, we got to go. So Emily, I would really love to hear, some of your experiences, or if you had information on, even educating the medical community, because that's such a big need as well.
You just have to teach her to be assertive, make people listen, make people wait. And yes, I have a lot of experience with educating medical professionals. For example, for the last 3 years, I have spoken on a panel to medical school students about disability.
Awesome. Thank you. And how lucky they are to have had you helping them out, because sometimes they just don't know. And once they hear your voice and how important it is, thank you for making such a difference. And I know you did, at least for me personally, here tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. And I know we're at our time already, but if you had a quick anything that you wanted to say before we sign off, I just wanted to give each of you a chance to say something in closing.
I just would love to thank Emily and all the other parents as well that came to and shared their experiences. We get I spend a lot of time in the schools and training staff, and it's so wonderful to see you, Emily, and see I see some of my futures. I see you now, and I can see my students as you in the future, and it really gives me a lot of hope. So thank you. And thank you also CPAC for hosting this.
Thank you. And we appreciate you all coming here tonight. And this was my first panel with an AAC user, and I thought it was awesome. So it was a very cool experience. So thank you for sharing, Emily, and thank you all for sharing tonight.
I would love that if you do reach out. I will also give you the information of my business.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
I had the link copied and ready copied to your business, Emily. So I just pasted that in the chat. M's Disability Advocacy Consulting Services.
All right. So are you guys don't want to add anything else? You're all good for the night? Thank you. I think we're going to have you on again for some more questions. I'm sure we'll think of 1,000 after, but thank you all tonight for coming and sharing with us. And we look forward to talking with you again in future.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate
Thank you
everyone's
all.
experience.
Good night.
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 Night. Good night.
Thank you. Good night. Jude.